Welcome to Giving Back is Dead. Giving Back is Dead is about generational changes in attitudes towards giving to the arts. We're talking today to Elizabeth Margulies. Elizabeth is an art advisor and collector, and she's also the daughter of one of our most well-known collectors, Martin Margulies. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you? It's nice to have this conversation. So we're talking in anticipation of seeing the exhibit that you curated of your personal collection at your father's nonprofit space, The Warehouse. And I wonder if you
Yes.
could tell us a little bit about why you did it, and what we're going to see.
Yeah, well, I started collecting a few years ago and I've never shown my collection to the public ever. I finally have amassed enough works that I have a solid collection to show, and my dad finally let me have two gallery spaces in the warehouse, so I was super happy to show my the work that I have. And I love a lot of those artists. I know them personally, and I love supporting young artists, and it's great exposure for them, for me, for young collectors to see. Hopefully we'll be inspired to start collecting and know that you don't necessarily have to spend an exorbitant amount of money to start collecting good art and support the arts.
I hope it does encourage everybody, as you say. So tell us, what has it been like growing up in such a well-known family of collectors? And how has that impacted what you're doing, what you're looking at, and the idea to show the collection at your father's space?
Well, I mean, growing up around the type of art that my dad has in the house was always, when I was a kid, I didn't really even know what it was. I just loved the art. I didn't realize that it was like Rothko or Twombly or any of that stuff. So I just kind of really developed an appreciation for the art itself before I knew the dollar amount of any of this stuff. I've been going to art fairs with him and galleries and meetings since I was a little girl. So naturally, I was just exposed to art throughout my life and really started to take an interest in it when I was very, very young. I wanted to be an artist because I didn't really understand the business part of it at that point. I just really love art and I always have. It's been a great experience growing up with a dad who is so immersed in the art world.
Did you often go to art fairs and museums with him? How did he?
All the time, all the time. Every vacation we've ever taken, pretty much my whole life has been centered around art. Not a lot of beach vacations, mostly major cities with major art museums and galleries and dealers. And, when I was a kid, I kind of thought it was like a little bit boring, but then I started to appreciate it as I got older. And we have great vacations because we just look at art the whole time.
And your other siblings, are they also interested in art?
My brother Joe is a graphic designer. He's very talented. He has a very, very good eye and a really good aesthetic, and he's definitely interested in art. He designed my dad's collection book that came out 2 years ago. Um, it's great. He did the cover and designed the whole book. My other two brothers are not interested in art at all.
Interesting. So I found a couple of quotes from you that I wanted to read because I thought it was relevant to what we're discussing. And one is that you said, "I want to make people aware of the intrinsic value of art, the rewards and the cultural capital that art brings to every project or city." And you also said somewhere else, "My mission is to bring art to the public and make it accessible to everyone."
A lot of people won't necessarily go to a museum. They don't want to. They've never really thought about going. Um, it's great to have things out in the world that people can just accidentally see and appreciate. Sometimes they'll be walking down the street, they'll look, they'll see a sculpture, they'll see a mural, and they'll say, "Wow, that's amazing. What is that?" And maybe it'll spark their interest and, get them to start looking at more art, going to a museum, maybe starting to go to galleries and just kind of making them aware of art. It also just makes people happy. When you see, like, for example, like a Kenny Scharf mural on the street, like you can't help but like smile when you see that.
So, Elizabeth, as you know, this podcast is about generational changes in attitudes towards giving to the arts. And I'm using the word giving instead of philanthropy because I want to look at um, giving in a more holistic way, that giving is not simply about giving money to large institutions. So I think so there are several reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with you. And one of them is I think that your idea of making art more accessible to the public is part of giving to the arts. Do you, what do you think about that?
I definitely think that it is. I think ultimately one of the most important things is supporting young artists because, um, a lot of people, we need young artists, we need emerging artists, we need them to, be able to afford studio space and to create work. And that keeps this whole art world that we all love so much going, um, and to ensure that there's a future there. Um, I think showing art to the public is obviously super important. You know, People need to see it to appreciate it, and you can't appreciate art if you can't see it. So, what my dad's done is great. A lot of other Miami collectors open their private collections to the public as well, and people really, really enjoy seeing those things. They do a lot of tours and, student groups and elementary school kids, and it's just another way of exposing people to art and getting them interested. If they just connect with one thing or feel some sort of, um, you know, connection, I guess, with one painting or one sculpture or a color. I mean, there's all these feelings involved when kids see art. And I think educating kids about the arts is extremely important also.
And what do you think? What do you mean when you say the intrinsic value of art? You want people to have a better understanding of the intrinsic value of art.
Well, just how happy it makes you. I mean, when I walk into my home and I see all my art, it just makes me feel good. Right now, I don't have any art hanging in my apartment because a lot of it's at the warehouse and the rest is in storage because I just moved to Miami. And I definitely feel like something's missing in here. It doesn't feel great when there's nothing on the walls. Um, you look at something, I do at least, I look at a painting that I bought a few years ago and I think about the story behind it and a time in my life, things I was going through when I got the painting, things that remind me of certain things, and a portrait of someone who I think is beautiful, or a landscape that I find serene, puts me at ease, just things like that. That sort of intrinsic value. Also, there's so much rich history when you look at art. You can see influences from painters from Renaissance times and post-war contemporary and modernist paintings, and you can see that a lot in emerging art too. So there's so much that it really does and makes you think about.
And I'm also particularly interested in, since we've had a couple of conversations prior to this conversation, I'm interested in the fact that you are not involved with more traditional ways, or I would say the older generation, traditional ways of giving to nonprofits in the arts. And that you think it's more relevant, if I understood correctly, in today's world to be involved with social impact nonprofits and not art nonprofits. Is that what you think? And tell me more about that.
I think it's more popular to give to social impact charities, and because of everything that's gone on in the past few years, especially. I don't think I don't think people want to give to museums because they just assume, you know, these museums are for these big, old, rich people who have tons of money and the artists are already established. And why would I give to that? So, what I think needs to be, I guess, promoted a little bit more would be supporting artists, I think. Um, I mean, that's what I would do. So, I don't know. I try to do that by buying their work, even though that obviously benefits me as well. But even that, I think, is great if you have pure intentions and you're not, flipping the artwork or doing something sketchy with it. I think if your intentions are pure and you really want to support emerging artists and show their work, that's sort of charity in a way.
I'm really pleased that we're having this discussion because I realize that the genesis of the podcast has been my talking to people more like yourselves who tell me, why should I give to the arts? They mostly tell me they want to make the world a better place. And how is giving to the arts making the world a better place? And they also seem they don't want to give to elitist, they don't want to encourage elitist causes. They see the arts caught up in a kind of elitist cause. They see it more like this elitist social club. And that really was the impetus of this podcast. And I realized that up until now, I've only talked to people who have more been next gens who have been addressing how we can give nevertheless and address social inequality. So I'm pleased that you're the first person I have who's actually articulating what was the genesis of this whole podcast.
I also think that art needs to be more normalized. And kids need to be educated about art, in mentoring programs. Like Free Arts does that, and like Urban Arts Partners, they teach kids, they mentor kids and teach them about creativity, because ultimately creativity plays such a huge role in success for a lot of people, financial success, job success. Um, and kids need to see art and learn that they can do this too, and they can create anything that they want to create. And I think that's a really strong message and a really important message.
So what I'm hearing is that you do think that arts nonprofits that are more focused on education and reaching out in
Yes,
education, that's something that could interest you. And
definitely,
particularly
definitely.
reaching out to more underrepresented communities. That's the kind of thing that,
Absolutely.
very good, very interesting.
I think that's a good way of being charitable in the arts and also helping people. And I truly believe that that is a very effective way of helping people, because these kids, I don't know what they're taught, but even when we go to school when we were younger, it's like, do this, do this, do this, do this. And they just kind of go, you just kind of go through the motions. And to teach somebody to be like truly creative, that they can do whatever they want in this world and create what they want, I think is super important.
And since we're all going to be in Miami next week, and I would like it if you could talk a little bit about the arts nonprofits in Miami. What do you think about the whole infrastructure and your involvement? Give us your view of what's going on there in terms of the nonprofits.
To be honest with you, I just moved back here 6 months ago, and so I'm not involved with any of it as of yet. What I would potentially like to be involved with is maybe Fountainhead Residency. It's an artist residency here.
I don't know Fountainhead Residency. Do you want me to tell me a little bit about that?
I don't know too much about it, but they basically artists apply, they accept a few artists. I think it's maybe three per month or something like that, and they pay for their travel and their housing. And the artist works in a studio and makes art for the month that they're here, and then the residency actually helps the artist place some of the work if they want. But this is another slippery slope, because a lot of people have residencies and they just expect um, to get like a few paintings at the end of it, which really is like sometimes very like inequitable, I guess. Like, it's not, somebody's giving a painting that's worth $50,000. Like, what's the point of, like, this is self-serving, and that defeats the whole purpose of really helping. Um, but this residency, I don't does not do that. They truly want to support the artists and help them get exposure. They know a lot of galleries, dealers, collectors. They have open studios. So potentially, I would like to get involved with that once I learn more about it.
Well, talk to me about Pam. So we've all followed a little bit Pam Perez Art, which is a major contemporary art museum in South Florida, in Florida. No,
Yeah, so we don't really have it. We used to have the the Miami Museum, and um, now it's called the PAM, because,
ma'am to Pam.
well, yeah, um, but that's Miami's public art museum, which no one really realizes, because it's named after one individual, and it's called the Perez Museum. So nobody really considers it a public art museum in Miami, especially. I mean, in fact, whenever I ask my friends about it or talk about it, my friends from New York, they think it's George Perez private collection.
They do.
So
Incredible.
they do, because it's called the
Yeah.
Perez Museum, and there's the Margulies. Not that the Perez Museum's gorgeous and huge, and Herzog de Murin, amazing architecture right on the water. I mean, it's a sensational building. But a lot of Miami collectors and a lot of people don't want to give to a public museum that's named after one person. Um, People want to get credit for their charity, and know that it's going they definitely don't want one person taking all the credit for their charity.
What do you think about that?
I just think it would have been better if it was called Miami Art Museum,
Yeah.
and it's really a shame that the city like missed that opportunity, because it's, like I said, such a great building, such a great property right on the water. I mean, it would have been amazing to have A lot of the collectors from Florida, from Miami, especially now we have so many people from New York and all over the place moving to Miami. Um, I don't know if they're going to want to donate a painting or 5 paintings or money to a museum that's named after someone else that isn't that people don't even realize is a public museum.
It's a problem. I think that's a real problem. I think you underlined a real problem. And so if
Yeah,
if it was more clearly the public museum, would it be something that you think you would be interested in being involved in?
absolutely. And I think a lot of people feel the same way.
Very interesting. And is there any discussion? I mean, you would think that that Perez could make the generous proposal to change the name. I assume that some of the major potential donors there must be suggesting that to him.
I don't know. I don't
You
think
don't
that's going to
know.
happen.
Well, okay. Is there anything else you think that we should be seeing in Miami while we're there?
Yes, there's a solo exhibition by an artist, a Chinese artist named Zhang Chang at the ICA that opens next week. So I'm excited to see that. I have a work of his hanging at the warehouse as well in my collection, and emerging artists, so that's exciting. I'm thinking what else. Um, Really excited to see Nada. That's one of my favorite fairs. Almost for me, it's almost sometimes more fun than actual Basel Fair because it's all, younger galleries, emerging artists. I love discovering new artists and seeing new things, and it's more affordable for most people, and it's just like more casual and less like stuffy.
Elizabeth, thank you very much for coming and talking to us today, and I look forward to seeing you in Miami.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
Be sure to check out our latest podcast and subscribe to Giving Back is Dead.